convenient. What is going on YouTube? There are two things in the world that I really like. Number one, video games, and two, photography. And one thing I love to do is try to combine them both. I get inspiration from capturing a certain aesthetic from a video game, for example, and then I would incorporate that into some of my photography. One video game I loved growing up was actually Bioshock. This really has the aesthetic of an Art Deco, cinematic, theatrical type theme. So we're gonna go and capture that. We're gonna put a little twist on it. We're gonna use these things, which are called prisms. I've never used them before, so I'm gonna give them my best crack. Essentially, it just refracts light into your camera lens and gives it a completely different vibe. We're going to two locations today, one being the Regal Theatre and the second one being the Capri Theatre at night time. So we're gonna have two separate locations at two separate times. That's enough talking. We're gonna go meet up with our model Amelia and capture some bangers.
If anything, there's a big fold here.
Oh yeah, that's sick. Actually, yeah.
Like it's big.
And like you can also feel free to move it with your arm. We'll have the fur on your shoulders though.
Mm-hmm.
So elegant. That's cool. Now look at me. That's sick. These are turning out so much better than what I thought. Yeah, that's perfect. That is actually. Now, like with your hair as well, just like maybe like flick your hair a bit in the front. 3. Just let me know when you're ready.
Ready?
Yep. So we've chose like the perfect location. I generally think we actually have chose the perfect location. That's perfect.
That is a very fun, like, quad stretch, right? You're like, we did all the workouts.
What I'm confused about is when's this movie start?
Yeah, like, do they have more than one theatre?
These are nuts. That is fucking so cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
We'll go to that up there now. The reason why this shoot is going really well is because the black opera mask, the dress, and the red lipstick completely match the environment, and this creates consistency with all the photos. So this is some advice that you could probably take on for your next shoot, is try to match the outfit with either your environment, or you can create a contrasting outfit with your environment, but there has to be some sort of vision and story that really makes it make sense, if that makes sense. Please don't fall. 99 IQ right there. Oh!
I think I can get something similar.
Yeah, just saying, from this angle, it looks so unsafe. Not something I should probably be saying, but.
That's fine. Everything's your fucked. Don't save it, sign any waivers.
Or even like use that as like almost like wings. I reckon that'll be pretty cool.
Alright, ready?
Yep. so far when it comes to capturing this Bioshock aesthetic, I feel like I'm doing it pretty well. It's not going exactly the direction I originally pictured it to go, but nevertheless, the pictures are turning out sick, which is completely okay because the overall vibe of the Art Deco theme is being captured.
Yeah, these are sick.
Alright, so the first shoot is done. I must say, that shoot was actually extremely difficult, considering that some locations were a lot darker than I thought, but also holding up a heavy camera lens and also a prism at the same time was just extremely exhausting. At the same time, it was very rewarding. I've had a brief look at some of the shots and I'm extremely proud of how they turned out. We've got one more to go later tonight, so we'll meet up with our model in a few hours. Alright, that is a wrap. And now I'm going to take you through how I would edit these photos. So let's get into it. Alright, so first thing first, I would adjust the crop, straighten it up a bit. I see that's a little bit off and there's a little bit of this refraction from the prism that I want to get rid of. So what I'll do is I'll straighten that up. I like to go from top to bottom, and then what I'll do is I'll go back to the basic adjustments and fuck around with them a little bit more to see where I can fix and whatnot. So in this scenario, we would probably decrease contrast by a bit. So bump down the contrast a bit. That would bring in a little bit more detail into the image. Increase shadows. Yeah, I reckon about 30. 30 is good. Now the thing about increasing shadows is that sometimes you can bring in a decent amount of noise depending on the ISO of the image. So we are sitting at 1200 ISO, which is pretty decent. Increase white just there. And here I would decrease blacks. We'll see how we go with the tone curve. We might not need to decrease blacks. I would decrease clarity, soften up the skin and whatnot. A little advice is I normally don't go below -20 clarity, just because I feel like it can reduce, it just completely reduces sharpness. But at the same time, if you want to achieve some sort of glow effect in your images, it's a great way of getting some sort of, but it does make your photos get a little bit more of a hazy feel to it. I reckon I reckon that's enough clarity. Now this is, I would actually increase the texture by about maybe 10. I always like to increase texture just a little bit, just to make the image look a little bit sharper. But if your image is quite noisy, I normally don't fuck around with the texture that much, because that would actually increase the noise a bit. Next, we move on to vibrancy. I actually will increase the vibrancy by a bit. If you guys don't know what vibrancy does, it actually boosts the underrepresented colors. So if you see why it's not boosting the reds as much as all the other colors, that's because the red is a very dominant color in this image. So, and saturation boosts everything equally. Alright, so we'll actually increase the vibrancy by maybe 15, and then we'll decrease the saturation by about 8. I feel like that gives it a decent balance. Now it's not looking like amazing now, but tone curve. We'll boost up the highlights just a bit. We'll decrease them. By the way, decrease them, we'll add in the tone curve. It makes it look like less dominant, in my opinion. I feel like that's kind of what I'm after. I don't really want to make everything pop. We'll give the image some fade. Drop just down by maybe. And down to the midtones just. Actually, you know, I reckon it's better. Looking good. Let's go with the. This is very important with the tone curve, simply because just the most minute adjustment of these can completely fuck your image. So just be really careful when you're changing them. Now I want to add a little bit of red to the highlights, and then a little bit of blues, a little bit of cyan to the darks. Alright, I reckon that's all we need for the tone curve for now. Alright, red. You know what? Let's increase the saturation. Let's increase the saturation by about, I reckon 25. That's not overly dominant. I feel like that's a really good balance. I feel like I can fuck with that. We'll bring it up to the pinks by just a little bit, not too much. Then what I'll do is I would actually increase the lumens in the reds just by a little bit. This is mainly for that bit in the prism. Makes that red in the prism stand out a bit more, so that's why I'll do it. Next is oranges. Now oranges and yellows, sometimes reds, are mainly gonna change the skin tone, so we want to keep them reasonably the same. So I wouldn't really drop the lumens that much. We want to change the skin tone to make it a little bit less yellow, so we're gonna drop the oranges down by about 10. I would increase the saturation just by a little bit. Yeah, that's looking alright. I'll decrease the yellows by about 10 and make that just a little bit orange. You don't want too much yellow on that image. I reckon we've got our skin tones pretty much perfect. I wouldn't do anything else to them. Every time you look at a photo, sometimes you feel like you can do more to it, but in doing so, you could actually ruin your image. So I would suggest less is more. Try to take a step back, see if your photo actually needs more editing. But for now, I reckon the skin tones, and for the most part, I reckon this is not a bad edit. HSL sliders are pretty much done. Here, I would actually make it a little bit more pink, just by a little bit, because if you make it too much, you can actually see where the color's changing, and we do not want that. Alright, see, when I boost the saturation, you can see where the color changes. We don't want that to be too obvious, so we're just gonna boost it by about 8, and boost the magentas by about 8 as well. This is your color grading panel. Now, these are important. These can either make or break your images. So this slider here is gonna bring whatever color that you want into the shadows. These are your highlights, so these are gonna dictate all your brights. So this part here and the prisms, sometimes the skin tones as well. And mid-tone is gonna be really like a balance between the both. It's gonna be like your overall color of your image. We're gonna bring some bluish purples to the shadows. Highlights, oranges. We're gonna go over the light oranges, and let's see if we can do anything with the mid-tones. Maybe, yes, with the mid-tones, we're gonna put some little bit oranges in there as well. Alright, so we can see the photos looking pretty decent as far as color goes. Next, I would first check to see if it needs profile corrections, which I actually think it looks better like this. You want to keep that ticked, but sometimes always check that to see if it looks better without it. Well, let's put a little bit of vignetting. Let's not go with grain. Everyone nowadays wants to just chuck grain in their photos, but I don't think this image necessarily needs it. Alright. Some people say you should start with camera calibration. I prefer to end with it. This calibration is going to dictate how Lightroom actually interprets the color in your photo. People tend to overlook this, but mastering the calibration is going to be extremely important when it comes to editing photos. So here, we're going to put maybe a little bit more, make the res a little bit more pink. We're going to increase the green primary by about 10. We're going to decrease the blue primary. And that's pretty much almost done. That's almost done. That's the colors we have gotten so far. We're from a bit of a yellowish photo to a bit of a more red photo. So I'm really liking how this is turning. What I might actually do is I might change the lipstick, the red in the HSL sliders to a bit more orange rather than pink. You might think I didn't see shit, but it does make a difference. So, alright, now we're pretty much done. We're just gonna add some masks. So we'll start with a linear gradient, bump up the exposure just a little bit, bump up the highlights just a little bit, and then we are going to increase clarity by about 20. This is actually because it makes the prism line stand out a little bit more. I think it gives a better effect, and we're going to decrease the haze by about like 5. Now to bring a little bit more central focus to this image, I will actually create a radial mask. I'll invert it and literally just decrease the exposure just a little bit. And then I'll create another linear gradient from the top. Now this is important. I'll create it going across like that, but I will deselect the subject so it doesn't affect her. Bring the exposure down just a little bit, maybe lower the shadows a bit. And that is pretty much it. If you want to go more in depth, I would actually, you know what? Yeah, fuck it. And then last thing is I would get a brush. I'll paint over the iris, bump up the exposure just a little bit, bump up the highlights, bump up the contrast, bump up the shadows, and then bump up the clarity and bump up the texture. And that is looking good. And that just makes the iris stand out so much more. A lot of people won't see it, but it definitely stands out to me. And yeah, that is literally it. That's how I would edit a photo like this. And then what I'll do is I'll just highlight a few of my favorite images and then click Command Shift S. And then you click synchronize, and what that does is that would actually copy and paste that edit onto those photos. So this is a very fast way of editing a large amount of photos, and boom, we are done. And that is the edit. Alright, that is done for this video. So if you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe. All photos will be posted on my Instagram. Big shout out to the model Amelia. I definitely wouldn't have done this without her. It's definitely so happy on how these photos turned out. Hopefully you guys learned something from this video, and hopefully you enjoyed it. That's pretty much all I have to say. I will see you in the next video.